Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another conversation in Learning from Leaders, the podcast where we explore the journeys, insights, and experience of people who are making a meaningful impact through leadership. I'm RJ Horner, your host and co-founder of the Beacon Fellows Academy of Leadership. And each episode, we sit down with leaders, thinkers, and change makers who are serving others, building influence, and sharing the lessons they've learned along the way. Our goal is simple: to help you learn from those who've walked the path before you so you can grow into the leader you were meant to become. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Scott Paradis. And Scott, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be with you, RJ.
So you and I have had a conversation. You've had quite the leadership journey that people, I think, are going to benefit today. But before we get into leadership, let's help our leadership or our listeners get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you're most passionate about today.
Sure. So I originally grew up in New Hampshire, which is up in New England in the United States. I had gone to college there. My intent originally, when I graduated from college, was to light the world on fire. But because of our family situation, I ended up, when I was graduated from high school, I joined the Army Reserve, and I went through college. I got a commission, and I stayed in the Army Reserve. But when we were going to have our first child, instead of lighting the world on fire, I'd had a lot of entrepreneurial challenges. Let's just put it that way. And so I needed something more stable. So I applied to go on active duty with the Army. Spent the next 30 years on active duty with the Army all over the United States, went to Europe, went to the Middle East, that sort of thing. Had a great experience, what my wife and I called seeing the world on Uncle Sam's dime, but also growing personally and professionally. When I completed my last tour, I was assigned to the Pentagon. I retired from the Pentagon, and I wanted to get involved in something that would make a contribution and have an impact. So I got in personal and professional development. And that's when I started to write books, put together educational programs, and that sort of thing. And ultimately, my wife and I, when I retired, we ended up, because of family reasons, moving to Alaska. We spent a number of years in Alaska, and now my family, my son and his wife, are in the Denver, Colorado area. So we recently moved from Alaska to Denver, Colorado, where I am now. So it's been a great journey, a wild ride, lots of fun, lots of growth and expansion, and it's great to be with you.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. You have had an experience through life, right? You've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and I'm hoping you're going to get the chance to share them with people here throughout our conversation today. So how would you describe yourself beyond your professional title or your leadership role?
Well, I would say if we were to meet personally, you'd probably think of me, or I think of myself, as a thinker. So I'm seeker of truth. I weigh ideas and I dig into ideas, and through my experience, kind of peel back the curtain and try to figure out what's really going on. So, I mean, I'm active. I'm active with my dog and my family and fitness and those kinds of things. But I would say for the most part, really, I'm exploring how the world works and how people can benefit the most from who they are as individuals.
I love that. That's good. And I hope we're going to break away some of those layers today as we have a deeper conversation. But so let's go back to the early years. And you talked about joining the Army, 30 some years ago. We all have an image of what that's like, right? We watch movies, we think of basic training, and we think of all the hardships and stuff. Maybe describe, what was that change like in your life at that time?
Well, it really was a significant event. So what ended up happening was, when I was in middle school years and into the early years of high school, I had thought about joining, maybe potentially going to a service academy. But as I reached my senior year of college, I ended up applying for some schools, and I got accepted at the state university, so the University of New Hampshire. So I kind of put that idea. My father had served in the Air Force, and I had uncles and so forth in the Army, and that had served in the Army and that sort of thing. But I kind of put that on the back burner. Now, interestingly enough, as a senior in high school, I'd already accepted that I was going to the University of New Hampshire. So I got a phone call, and the phone call was from an Army recruiter. And what I expected was, I'm going to tell him I'm going to college, and he'd say, "Thank you very much, good luck." Instead, he responded with, "Have I got a deal for you?" The deal for you was to join what was called at the time the simultaneous membership program, where you enlist in the Army Reserve, which is for us a 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks annual training for a number of years. And then the simultaneous part was going to college. You enroll in the Reserve Officer Training Corps for a commission while you're going to college. So 3 days out of high school, off I went to Army basic training. And it really was an adventure. So it was all the physical things, all the things you see in the movies. It was all of that, you know, the discipline and the physical part. But I loved it. I just enjoyed both the camaraderie of it and the physical nature of it. And it really was a challenge. I went through the 8 weeks of what was then at that time Army basic training, and then I returned and enrolled immediately in college. So you can imagine, no hair at all, you know, a crew cut. Now this was the 1980s, you know, we had big hair back then, and I didn't have any. So it was that experience. But I had then enrolled in the Reserve Officer Training Corps. So I was doing the reserve thing, which was 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks annual training and so forth, and the ROTC, the Reserve Officer Training Corps courses and programs to earn a commission. It was a bit of a balancing act with college and the reserves and the ROTC, but it was manageable and it was fun. And I thought, okay, I'll stay in the reserve. I was going to light the world on fire once I graduated from college through all my entrepreneurial ventures. And then my goal initially, so once I got my commission, was I'll make it to captain, which is a company grade. It's a pretty good rank. It's a third rank amongst the officer corps in the Army. And then I'll probably leave the reserve, and, you know, I'll have this huge empire in my entrepreneurial endeavors, and all will be well. But things did not play out exactly that way.
So we'll get into that in a second, but you touched on something and I want to catch it. So is this program, this simultaneous journey, still available for people today?
That's a good question. I believe it is. Now, of course, I've been away from that area of the program for a long time, but it probably, I'm sure you can enlist in the reserve and still apply for the commission. So I'll bet it's something that is still available today. The rules might have changed a little bit, but I bet you it still is.
I just wanted to draw attention to that, because here's a way for people who, they try to get the scholarships, they try to get, the funds, maybe take out OSAP to try and go to college or university. But here's a way that, look, if you're willing to, maybe serve a little bit, serve your country, do something a little bit more empowering, you're willing to they're going to train you to be a leader. They're going to send you to college. What a great experience for people really starting out, and to jump into a leadership role right from the start too, as well. So
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great program.
Mm-hmm. So you've gotten out of college now. You said you were going to light the world on fire, with your entrepreneurial journeys. What did you do there?
So the very first idea I had, now again, this was the 1980s, so before the explosion of the computers, I came up with this idea of how could we have a dating relationship, and what if we had a survey, and what if we could survey each other and come up with people who had communal or interests that were the same or similar, looking for the same kinds of people, essentially become a matchmaker, but through this survey. So I created this survey, and I started it was a very rudimentary way to sell it, but you might be familiar, back in the college days, there used to be strips of paper, and they'd have whatever they're selling, and you pull off this piece of paper and you call the number and that sort of thing. And my product was surveys that you could use to find other people. Now, it wasn't as organized as the online dating is today, but it is, in my mind, it was a precursor to what you do now through those dating services. I thought it was a great idea. I did not have the marketing acumen to get that to have any momentum and take off. So I tried other things. I got into real estate. I became a real estate agent, thought I would make my way in real estate. I realized again that marketing was a very different skill, and I really wasn't that excited about the skill. I was more excited about these ideas. There was an organization, actually it was a racetrack near where I lived, and they were selling the racetrack. And I thought, what if you had a huge mall of sports stores. And more than just the sports stores, you could experience the sports. So like you'd have batting cages, or you'd have trampoline events, or soccer fields indoors, and all of those kinds of things. So I tried to sell that idea to this organization that was selling the racetrack. Again, didn't get any traction. I got involved in manufacturing. I became, to kind of make ends meet. My wife we got married a couple years out of college, and she was teaching school. So she was a steady income. I was up and down with my income. I was still in the Army Reserve, but I was trying all these things. Got into manufacturing, and then actually went into law enforcement as a special police officer. So I was working some shifts in law work, in law enforcement work. I was working in the reserves, and then I was pushing my ideas to try to get those to all flower. So I had what I would consider a half a dozen millionaire maker and ultimately became billionaire maker ideas, but none of them took off for me personally. So when our first child was coming along, we decided we wanted Lisa, my wife, to be able to stay home, and I needed to have a steady income, and that's when I applied to go on active duty.
Got you. And then, you've learned a lot in the leadership along the way. But I love, and maybe this is a lesson for people out there, is that you've tried your hands in many hats, right? You look, as any entrepreneur would, you may not just be able to come up with that single idea that's gonna, bam, that's it, I'm a millionaire, right? But that's the dream.
Right.
So what kept you going through that phase?
Well, I was always excited, and I was always optimistic. So I expected something to take, something to flower, or build some momentum, and then that momentum to grow. It didn't happen that way, but we were young. It was exciting. The opportunities were there. And then when I decided, well, let's change course and let's pursue the Army full time, then it was a different environment. So the Army, as you can imagine, it's a large corporation. It's an institution. It's a million people spread around the world with a hierarchy, and it's a corporate environment. So I changed my focus, but then I reoriented my goals to, remember I mentioned my first goal was to make it to captain, and then I'd probably leave the Army. Well, I went on active duty as a captain, and then my goals now changed, that I was going to climb the corporate ladder, have a degree of success, but again, using the Army as an opportunity to see the world, grow individually, and help make a contribution and an impact within the organization. So my focus shifted.
Thank you for your patience.
No
Your
worries.
focus shifted.
Yes.
So, so where do we go from there? Look, so you got full time. Now, one of the things I preach is, we get stuck in this job, right? We have dreams, we have ideas, a passion to do what makes us happy. And you talked about how life hit you. You needed that full-time income. You jumped full-time into being in the Army. First of all, was that joyful for you?
It was. I thought as an adventure, and it was an opportunity to travel, go and do things I hadn't done before, be exposed to people I hadn't been exposed to before, in situations and circumstances that were new to me. So we saw it, both my wife and I saw it as she was an Army brat. Her father had been in the military, so she moved her whole life. So then we just started that every 3 years, moving on to something new. And it turned out to be a great adventure and a great opportunity both.
And I love that, because look, I think if you're going to get into a profession, look, and I've been in a profession for a lot of years. I was a driver for many years, professional driver, but I was working for a great organization. I've been a driving instructor, but because when I was 18, I had a passion to drive. That's all I really wanted to do. Now I'm in I learn and grow. I discovered, personal development. Now I'm a training coordinator for the same organization. So I do have passion for my work. And I think that's one of the keys, right? Is to find fulfillment in what we do.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And one of the key things you mentioned, folks who get stuck, one of the things I would recommend, then if you feel like you're stuck in a position, the way that I would say to approach it is to grow yourself out of that position. In other words, contribute all you can, do the best job that you can, and as you grow as an individual, you will outgrow that position and other doors will open. Not, I'm going to slow roll, I'm going to make it tough for these people to keep me employed, I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I would say do the absolute opposite. Even though maybe it's not what you're passionate about, still do the best job you absolutely can and grow yourself out of that position.
Your message matters. Your expertise has value. Learn how to share it with the world and become the authority people are looking for. Don't miss this special live training with best-selling author Raymond Aaron, who has authored or co-authored 147 books. And he's discovered one powerful strategy that has opened more doors, created more opportunities, and generated tremendous wealth for his clients. In this free webinar, you'll learn how to build your brand, position yourself as the go-to authority in your market, attract more clients, and dramatically increase your income through the power of authorship. Don't wait. Visit www.beaconfellows.com/101010 or click the link in the show notes.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm in this position now because, look, as a bus driver, I was unhappy. I was miserable. It was affecting my work. And I had to find a way to find joy in what I do again. Now, I did seek counseling. I needed it at the time. And it changed my life, by the way. So I do recommend out there for people to, look, if I can't get counseling, right? I'm a man. I don't talk to people. Look, counseling changed my life, changed my perspective. As such, I learned to excel, like you talked about, put myself into it, become the best I can at what I do. And I ended up getting into this role as a training coordinator, right? Now I'm learning how to become an instructor. But the entire purpose of me becoming an instructor is so I can start serving here online and become that instructor who can teach people how to walk away from that journey, build the life by their own design, right? So that's what I'm focused on now. And I really, I love what you said. Put your whole heart into it, so that you can build yourself out of that job. I think that's the idea right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then so I know that I am where I am because people have been with me along the way. Now, in the Army, you've got a lot of people working with you, helping with you. Were there people who, maybe acted as mentors or influenced your journey along the way?
There were from the very beginning, really, from the very beginning, because you're in a hierarchical organization, so you're working for supervisors and so forth, and then you're coaching, mentoring your subordinates. But in all of those relationships, you're getting advice, you're seeing other perspectives, and you're growing. For me, one of the keys was, so the Army is a very large institution, a very large organization, but immediately when I went on active duty, so I was full-time, we have a personnel officer. So I called up my personnel officer right away. My first assignment, I went to Kansas City, Missouri as a recruiting officer. So I was in a sales position, if you will, helping at the headquarters as we would recruit people for the Army. But immediately when I got there, I called up my guy and I said, hey, we'd love to go to Europe. He said, so would everyone else. Don't call us, we'll call you. But it planted a seed for the direction that I wanted to go. And as I was drawing to the end of that assignment, a 3-year assignment, drawing to the end, he called me back and he said, hey, are you still interested in going to Europe? And I said, I'd love to go to Europe. He said, well, there's a catch. The Dayton Peace Accords had just been signed. We're sending a multinational force into Bosnia. We need a replacement, somebody who could go right away. I said, no problem, I'll do it. So what I would offer for folks who are thinking about how to progress in an organization, your point of getting mentors and folks who can guide you along the way is key. It's essential, that counseling that you're talking about. But then plotting your own course and be willing to take the steps necessary to open those doors. Because those doors will open, but you've got to knock. You've got to ask. And so look, the direction you want to go, the things you want to achieve, start moving in that direction. Maybe it isn't going to all happen instantaneously, but just give it some time, contribute the best that you can in the circumstances that you're in, and the doors eventually will open.
And I like, because you said a few things there. The first one was you set your intention, right? You knew what you wanted to do. Then you spoke it out loud. right? You let somebody know, knowing that, okay, yeah, right, don't call me, we'll call you. Okay, maybe this is going to happen, but it's still in the back of your mind sitting there that this is the journey I want to take. And then when the opportunity came along, 3 years later, maybe, but the opportunity came along, what did you say? Absolutely, I'll take it, right? You were ready to jump in with both feet. And I think, but that's something that scares some people out there. What would you say to that?
Yes, I think that's the biggest thing that holds us back from having the life of flourishing, a fulfilling journey. And it really is this fear. And it's this fear of loss or fear of uncertainty. All of those things make us resist those very opportunities that are going to help propel us forward. We resist because we don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't know if we're going to stumble and fall. And some of that, it really, in a word, scares us. So to me, the issue is you've got to be willing to take those risks. And as you said, verbalize that intention, set that mark on the wall, and then start moving in that direction. And when the door opens, be willing to step through.
I love that. And listen, I'm going to take that to heart because I'm I'm on my path, right? I've been doing this work for a while. I know, look, I've given myself 2 years, at which time I'm going to walk away from this employment that I have, and I will be fully funded in my own ventures. That's my path. I know it's happening. So patience, right, is what I have to use right now. But I have set my intention, and I'm not lifting for anything else other than this is my intention. But I have to watch for that opportunity. And when it comes, I need to be ready for it. So I
Yes.
love that guidance for people out there. So you're now out of the army, right? What do you
Yes.
do now? I'm sure you still are in a leadership role. Where are you now?
Well, I'm now in the coaching, teaching, mentoring role. So when I left the Army, so I'd progressed through a number of positions and left. And I thought as I was retiring, what we call retiring, so leaving the Army, I wasn't retiring as in going to play golf, retiring, but I wanted to do something that made a contribution and impact. So I got involved in personal and professional development. So I started to write books in what I would frame as the success personal development arena, personal growth and development. So I wrote a number of books on everything from leadership, money, health, and fitness, but all essentially in that genre of success principles. So it was this idea of helping people to get their mind wrapped around some insights that would help them break through some of that resistance and be able to step into the life that they have been hoping for, dreaming for, desiring for all of these years. So I write books, put together educational programs. I have online programs. I have audio programs, those sorts of things. And then we'll speak workshops and so forth and speak to groups on anything from leadership and my latest projects about what's really going on. But leadership and those success principles are really fundamentally what I've been focused on.
And I love it. Look, I discovered personal development about 12 years, no, about 13 almost now. In fact, I know the day my life changed. It was the day after I started seeking counseling. Was here in Toronto. We had an ice storm in December of 2013. Day that changed my life forever. Because again, I had one more argument with my wife, and over something silly turned into a major argument. But it was a life-changing moment because I decided to start accepting responsibility for my life, discovered personal development, and I've been living and breathing. And I always say personal development is a lifestyle because I've been living and breathing for it for the last 12 plus years, right? So I do believe and I recommend it for anybody out there. So what would you, if somewhere along the lines you discovered this for yourself, what would you offer to people who need to know that this life is life-changing, like this personal development lifestyle is life-altering?
I think you hit the key, and that is essentially accepting personal responsibility for your own life and the direction that it takes. Because, and this is it, if you don't accept responsibility, then what you're doing is you're giving all your power away. If you give your power away, then you're just in the stream. So if we use the metaphor of you're in a river, you're going down the river and you're just being tossed to and fro. If you accept responsibility, the stream, you still may be in the stream, but you can pick the direction. Am I going to go with the current over here, or am I going to move over here? And I can start setting intentions and moving in the direction of those intentions because I'm responsible for my life. Now, we could get some deep into some spiritual dimensions of this, but the point is that once you accept that you are responsible for your life and the outcomes that you experience, it gives you a whole new level of power that you did not recognize you had before. You always had that power, but until you accept complete and total responsibility, then you've claimed all your power. And now I'm going to make it happen. And the universe is going to make it happen because now I've set my intention, my focus toward my passion, and things will automatically adjust to make the doors open that are necessary for you to grow as you are meant to grow.
I love that. That's amazing. Because again, I took responsibility, and look, there are many people out there who are struggling. They're unhappy. They're living in an unsuccessful life. They may even be on welfare or, not in a class of life that they might want for themselves if they had the choice. But I think what we're trying to say here is you have the choice, right? You can take control. In fact, that was one of the very first things my counselor taught me. She said, we're going to take back the power for you, right? And I think that's what it is. It's just grasping and saying, yes, I have that choice. And when you're on that river that you're talking about, it's reaching out and grabbing that, that branch that's hanging there that's going to bring me closer to the shore and get me off this, this downfall. And I also use an analogy for myself that, I was on that river of life and I was headed for the fall, right? The fall was taking me down, and people who were with me, they were jumping ship because they didn't want to go over, right? I was lucky to still have a couple people in my life who kept me strong. I took control because I needed to. I needed to own myself. And I think that's the key for people out there. I mean, they don't realize how much power that is, and we have it within us.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, RJ.
So we'll kind of get into, so you mentioned on something, and I'll let you talk about it because you have a book and you're working on a project about what is going on now. Let's talk about that a little, because people, they're going to start thinking conspiracies. They're going to think, we're being controlled, mind control. Let's talk a little bit about your passion project there.
Yes, yes. So let me frame it this way. I'm going to try to say, look at it objectively. Do you see environmental upheaval? I would contend there is environmental upheaval around the world. Things are happening that are unusual on a scale that we have not necessarily been exposed to before. We have economic stratification that is at an extreme. So there's a upper echelon of very wealthy who are getting wealthier, the masses not so much. We have political polarization we have not seen in 100 years. It's in the United States, it really is both disheartening and, in some respects, I'll use that word, insane. Then we have this technological advance that is like an overwhelming wave, and it's impacting every aspect of our lives. And so I would say it's technological overwhelm. Now, take those four factors and then just impose them on a typical life that is lived, that experiences loss, just as the nature of our being. So you have trials and tribulations, and you have loss, and you experience that as just a part of being alive. But then compound with those other factors, and it seems like we've reached a confluence of things coming together, which is unusual on a global scale. Okay. So this is the focus of what I say, what's really going on. From a social perspective, so if you look at socially, a scientific examination, there are a couple of think tank guys that wrote a book called The Fourth Turning. I don't know if you're familiar with that book. It was written about 20 years ago in the 1990s. And the guys that wrote it by the name of Strauss and Howe, The Fourth Turning, and they looked back hundreds of years and saw a cycle, a social cycle. And about every 80, 90 years, we go through this cycle. So from a social perspective, they said we're going through the cycle and we are now in the midst. We're at the culmination point of the chaos part of the cycle. But I would say, okay, so that makes sense to me that we're in this chaos part of the cycle. So they call it the fourth turning because they would say from a United States perspective, the first turning was the Revolutionary War. It set us on this new path. About 80 years later, we had the Civil War that changed our direction in a significant way. About 80 years later, we had what was World War II, which again changed the trajectory of the world. And now we're approximately 80 years later, and we're in this, what I would say, chaos, this period of chaos. So this period of chaos, so their perspective of it is that it's a social reset. What ends up happening is we follow a path of ultimately becomes every man for himself. And that every man for himself gets too far, and we get this chaos and calamity and collapse, and then we reset. We come together to unify and start again, have a reset. So that's their theory in a nutshell. But then I overlaid that with other spiritual theories, social theories, and looked at what potentially could be happening on a global scale. And I say that for us, it is really potentially a significant reset. If you look at society for the last 12,000 years, we have been using primarily a competitive paradigm. That is, the strong take from the weak, and that cycle repeats itself. Every once in a while, we realize if we connect and collaborate and create, we can prosper. We do that, but then the strong ultimately take from the weak, and the cycle keeps repeating itself. And we've been doing that for 12,000 years. What is essentially a taking methodology. And that taking has been, we've repeated that cycle through 12,000 years of human society, and we are at a point of actually breaking away from that cycle. But it, interestingly enough, comes back to what we've been talking about. It comes back to an individual choice. And that's what my focus is on, is what's really going on. Is I think we're at this break point, and we have to make a choice. Each individual has to make a choice as to whether they're going to go in the old paradigm, the existing paradigm of competition, or into a new paradigm of connection, collaboration, and creation.
I love and I love that, and I hope people catch on to it, because we could be controlled by the chaos, right? Go with the flow, allow what's happening to us to control us, or as we've been talking about, you can take control of your existence. And I've always believed, in fact, my vision was us working together for a better tomorrow. I don't exactly know how that works yet, but having conversations with people like you, I think we have the potential to change the world. And if we allow ourselves, we are destined for another world calamity, right? Another world war. Could be the planet ending war if you listen to Nostradamus, right? But again, we have the power to take control. Do you see, now you talked about individuals, taking their place and grasping it. Do you see a way forward so that we don't get worse or further down this rabbit hole?
I've always been hopeful. So as I progressed through the military, I ended up working both at the Department of the Army, so the highest echelon of the Army, and then I worked on Capitol Hill, both as a congressional fellow and a legislative liaison. So I was at the highest levels of our government, and I'd always been hopeful and optimistic that we would choose leaders that moved us in a positive direction, and that we would come together and make wise decisions. I'm coming to the point of realizing that for humanity, and this is an interesting sort of perspective to have. For most of us, it takes crisis to cause change.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. But I don't want to say we're just gonna throw our hands up and say, well, that's whatever crisis comes, I'm just going to experience it. No, you still have agency, you still have power, you still have choice that decides the resonance that you are in, what you focus on, whether it's a higher frequency or a lower frequency. The old paradigm, I would say, not to say that it's bad, but it's the old paradigm is a lower frequency. The new paradigm is a higher frequency. If you can resonate at a higher frequency, in other words, you keep looking for opportunities to connect, collaborate, and create. And here's the challenge for me personally. The challenge for me personally is to let go of judgment. It's to stop judging others and realize we are all connected and we're all better off when we are all better off. And that goes back to my agency of making choices that are positive and they help other people reach their full potential. So, will it get worse? The path we're on suggests it will get worse. But what I'm saying is that you individually, all of us individually, can make choices that in the end will make us better off. And those are choosing connection, collaboration, resisting the sense to judge and blame, resisting this idea of fear and hate and conflict and violence that only leads to pain and suffering, and choose a better course. Take your agency, your power, your responsibility, and make better choices.
I love that. And look, I've written down, and those words, those 3 words, the 3 C's as I'm calling them already, they've already guided me this far, right? I don't believe in competition. I do believe in collaboration. So connect with those people out there who are, like you say, in a higher frequency, right? Get with people who are on the same level with you. Collaborate. Look, working together for a better tomorrow, right? You have projects in mind. Somebody else have. Look, I hope this episode resonates with a whole lot of people out there, because you can connect with people. You can change the world. I can connect with people. I can influence those people and change their mindset, change their direction. So this is what we're talking about. You and I working together. Not necessarily, I'm not saying you and I are going to project out together. You know, who knows where our future goes. But what I'm saying is, look, connect with people out there of a like mind so that we can work on projects of mutual interest for mutual benefit. And then create something of value. Create that little thing that's going to take us from this calamity or chaos that we're in right now and turn it into something amazing and grateful that we can be grateful for.
Are you ready to step into your full leadership potential? To grow as a leader who inspires, empowers, and makes an impact? Welcome to the Beacon Fellows School of Leadership, a place where emerging leaders, coaches, and changemakers come together to master the skills, mindset, and strategies to lead with purpose. Through our immersive programs, you'll gain proven frameworks for building influence and authority, hands-on leadership development tools and workbooks, personalized guidance from experienced facilitators, a community of like-minded leaders committed to growth. Whether you're looking to lead a team, launch a movement, or simply grow in confidence and clarity, the Beacon Fellows School equips you with the skills, strategies, and support to shine as a leader in any arena. Join us today and start your journey to becoming a leader who leaves a lasting impact. Visit www.beaconfellows.com to learn more and secure your place at the Beacon Fellows School of Leadership. Your next step as a leader starts now.
Yes. You know, the competitive paradigm is really just dividing up the pie. So what exists, I'm going to try to get as much of it as I can. That's the competitive paradigm. The creative paradigm is I'm going to enlarge the pie. I'm going to create more value. The more value we create, the more we prosper, the more we flourish, the better off everyone is.
Yeah, and look, they say is the financial model right there, right? Serving others, showing them the value you have. And look, doesn't matter if you're making money from this source, create it, get it out there. And the universe, because you're adding value, will see that you're returned for that value.
Absolutely.
So we've had a great conversation to this point. I'm going to start to slowly wrap it up. And I want to get your ideas for how people should move forward from this, right? What are some of the key takeaways and what they can do to step into that future we've been talking about, right? So what is it that you feel people need to learn or take away from our message today?
I think we've covered some really powerful points.
Yeah.
And so I'll start with this one, since I think it holds us back most, and that's going back to this fear and resistance. So my first recommendation would be, if an opportunity presents itself, I know it's going to create fear.
Yes.
When you feel fear, I'm not going to suppress the fear. I'm going to recognize the fear. And then I'm still going to say yes anyway, as uncomfortable as it makes me. So it's not, I can't run from fear. I can't hide from fear. I'm not going to defeat fear. I'm going to feel the fear. I'm going to recognize I'm feeling the fear, and I'm just going to let it flow, as painful as that may be, but I'm still going to say yes to that opportunity despite the fear. So I would say, if you can build the habit, so this would be my number one recommendation in overcoming, I'll use the word overcoming fear, is recognize, why am I feeling this fear? Because if you realize you are ultimately powerful, then there is no reason to fear. You are connected, you are supported, you are loved. If you recognize that, then this fear is just letting you learn an opportunity. I'm going to let this fear flow through me, but I'm still going to say yes to that opportunity, even if it makes me feel uncomfortable. Because those opportunities are the chances to grow and expand.
Mm-hmm.
New opportunities will always come, but until you can overcome that fear and resistance, you're never going to go through those doors.
Yeah.
So that, to me, is the beginning of setting your journey. And then you mentioned, and you had said this before, intention. Set an intention, a deliberate intention, and move in that direction. Whatever's in front of you, do it the best of your ability. Grow yourself out of that situation into something new, and then say yes to whatever scares you next, that makes you feel uncomfortable, always in a positive direction, always in a value added. I'm going to connect, create, I'm going to connect, collaborate, and create, and add value. Because as you said, RJ, as long as you're adding value to the world, the universe will compensate you in an exponential way.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so, you touched on this being the fear being an energy, right? And letting that energy fuel you. And I love that because, look, fear comes with it a certain degree of adrenaline, right? It is its own adrenaline. And you could be an adrenaline, look, rather than reaching for the alcohol, rather than reaching for the narcotics, you can use this fear to drive you. Like I'm getting chills even talking about this, because that's what it is. It's this fear that, okay, yeah, this is scary, but that's also exciting, right? And if I can live in this excitement, who knows what I can accomplish, right? So I love that you put it in an energetic or spiritual forum. So the other thing we talk about on this, and I want people to become better. And we all want to have things, right? And we in personal development, we know the analogy be, do, have, right? So you reverse engineer that. We want to have those things. But in order to have those things, you have to become or be a person who can have those things. In order to have or be that person, you've got to be, do, have. So you've got to do some things that are going to allow you to become. But in order to do those things, you have to know some things, right? And that's the piece that's missing from it. And you have to learn what you need to know in order to be, do, have. So what would you recommend out there for people to develop, to grow? Is there something they need to learn that's going to take them on the next phase of their journey?
I would offer two things. And again, another point that you had made is this idea of associating with people who are already doing the things or are the type of person that you want to become. So surround yourself with people who are maybe just a little bit better, more skilled at, or already have achieved what you would like to achieve. Find those mentors, associate with those people, and learn from them. At the same time, you can do your own personal growth, which is a reading discipline, courses, programs, podcasts, all of those things that will feed you both the the optimism and the motivation that you need, but also those essential skills in whatever your field or your area of expertise that you are developing. So, because, this is interesting. Most people, they kind of settle. They don't go that extra mile and put in that little extra effort. If you can focus on something, let's just say whatever your subject matter is, if you can focus on that subject for 1 or 2 hours a day, 5 days a week as an example, and throw yourself into learning about that subject for 1 or 2 hours a day, you will be light years ahead of most people, because most people will do the minimum they need to get by. And it really is not necessarily the person with the innate talent, but rather the person with the motivation to apply themselves that really succeeds. And so I would do first associate with the right kinds of people, the people that are moving in the direction that you want to move in, and then adopt a personal educational regime, if you will, of reading and courses and programs and so forth. And then the third component to that, take on those challenges in whatever your field of expertise is. Put yourself out there, go into that uncomfortable zone and master that new skill. And I know it's challenging, it's painful, you're going to fall, you're going to stumble, but the key is just keep getting up. If you just keep getting up, you will eventually master that skill, and then you will be at a whole new level of both performance and flourishing that you might not have thought possible.
I love that. That's powerful. I hope people take away from that. By the way, I mentioned this on my last interview too. Last week, I picked up a fortune. I love my fortune cookies. I usually get a bad one. Usually get something stupid, doesn't really apply. But this one I kept in my hand because it says, admire those who succeed and learn from their successes. And look, we talk about affirmations and, those words that are going to guide us and help us become that person. So, they're helpful, they're useful, but there's also those quotes, those words that are they bring power and meaning to what we do. And this one guides what I do, because these are why I have these conversations. I'm now connecting with you. I have learned so much from you today, and I hope everybody else out there does, right? So take on those words, let them guide you, and figure out your purpose. Figure out that one thing. Like you said, if you can just learn one thing for 1 hour a day, you can really start to achieve. So find out what that is and then focus on that until you take that step forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I love that. By the way, so having talked about affirmations or quotes, is there a quote that really drives you in what you do?
Well, you've probably read somewhere along the line, Think and Grow Rich, and Napoleon Hill. Does that ring a bell with you? The Think and Grow Rich? Yes.
Just a little.
But this idea of see it and believe it and achieve it. And it's all the things that we have been talking about. Set the intention, build this habit of belief that even if it isn't that it's going to happen, it's not going to happen tomorrow necessarily, but I'm going to move in that direction. And as long as I keep moving, then I'm fulfilling my purpose, my passion, all of those things. So let me frame, and I'm going to take a little license with this last question. Let me just reframe a thought for you. And it's this idea of becoming. And it's not that I am changing myself into something new. What I'm doing really is peeling away all the masks and the facades that I have been wearing to reveal my true self. I'm going to reveal that I am this powerful, authentic, loving, connected human being that is having a flourishing, fulfilling experience and helping other people do the same.
Because that person was always in there, right? You're just exposing that person who was built on this. Look, you're building the sculpture, right? You're tearing away that stone chip by chip by chip until you truly become that model of that we see in the museum, right?
Absolutely.
By the way, to have my own little shameless plug, we talk about Napoleon Hill. I'm building my own events built on those three concepts: believe, conceive, achieve. And I call it the Dream, Believe, Achieve event. I've got another podcast based on that. I'm building my entire business built around that. So yes, Napoleon Hill resonates just a little bit. Um, and people mistake that, what Think and Grow Rich actually means, but that's a conversation for another day because we've talked about so much already. We do have to end the show, but I feel we could go on for another hour. But I want people to know, because look, you've opened up some doors for people. I can guarantee that today. So how can people connect with you? Is there any way that, do you offer a free product or anything like that we can connect people to you?
I would say, so two things. One, I've got 11 books that are all, you can find them, go to Amazon.com, that sort of thing. I have programs on Udemy.com and listenable.io, I think. Those sorts of things. So you can find my programs out there, and some I have a YouTube channel. But I would say if you want to connect with me, the one platform that I've been most focused on is LinkedIn. So if you have something in LinkedIn, so it's Scott, SCOTTF, Paradis, Paradis, find me on LinkedIn and send me a connection. And then if you have something that you want to talk about, by all means, send me a note and I'll help you in any way that I can.
So, and I'm not connected with you on LinkedIn, I don't think yet. So I will do that and connect with you and see where that collaboration or connection goes from there, because, and that's what it's all about, right? It's building those connections, connecting with, learning from, with, and growing with those people who are going to bring you to that higher level. We are the product of the 5 people we associate with. Let's start associating with better quality of people.
Yes, absolutely.
Scott, I thank you for your time today. It's been such a great interview. So I thank you for showing up today.
RJ, I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much. And back at you. So to everyone listening out there, leadership is a journey, and the best way to grow is to learn from those who have walked the path before us. If today's conversation inspired you, be sure to subscribe, share this episode with someone who would benefit from it, and continue your leadership journey with us. You can also learn more about leadership development and our growing community at the Beacon Fellows Academy of Leadership on School. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and continue shining your light on the world.